Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Richest Men in Town podcast. I'm Mike Freeman, and along with my good friend and co-host Tyler Gould, we're excited to welcome you to our little podcast project. Tyler and I are just a couple of middle-aged husbands and dads driven to live our best lives. We want to be better every day, so here we'll be sitting down with great people. Not famous people, but great people that we admire, to learn their secret to living the rich life. Probably not the rich life you're thinking of. Our guests come in humbled and surprised at the invitation and hopefully leave feeling proud and grateful, realizing just how good they really have it. So pull up a chair, stay a while, and raise a glass with us as we toast our guests to the richest men in town. All right, Tyler Gould, here we are at another launching point of another installment of your favorite podcast, right? It's your favorite?
It's in my top 5 at least, you know.
Well, tonight we just spent a couple of hours with Dan Collins. Talk to me about what you're taking away from your time with Dan.
I mean, we had the pleasure of talking to Dan a couple of weeks back through an introduction, right? And Dan was very humble in his conversation. And like a lot of our guests, when we first talk to him, they say, I don't have anything really to offer you. And we spent 2 hours and I was riveted by a life that was full of questions, full of faith, and full of just a desire to do what's right. He really talks about being willing to say yes and finding blessings and just turning blind faith, something we may not have any knowledge about, into something more meaningful. Mike, I could go on, but I loved every minute we had with Dan tonight.
The funny thing is I could go on, and I think that our guests, after listening to 2 hours, they're going to hit the end, and they're going to be like, wait, no, that can't, hold on, that can't be it.
You're right.
Tell me Dan Collins is coming back, right? Because his story builds, and I love the way life hands him things, and he just responds with faith.
Yeah.
And he gets real about the concerns that he has. And these challenges are coming at kind of weird times.
Yeah.
Right. Where he's in a place where he's providing for his family. He's being of service to other people. And he's having this crisis of faith. And I'm telling you, there's a whole lot riding on how he responds to that crisis.
Yeah, 100%. And I love how you say that. There's a lot riding on that. Because,
oh, man, if anybody could do a choose your own adventure and like, hey, have you ever thought of what if, Dan? Like, man.
Yeah,
I thought a lot of things hitched to his wagon.
Yeah, I thought he did a great job tonight of just talking about some of those hinge moments in his life that really were transformational. And it's funny because he talks about, at one point in our time together, he talks about how he loves the opportunity to transform lives, right? And he's involved really heavily in some really awesome charity work, some humanitarian work, and it's transforming lives. But I'm telling you, I felt transformed tonight just sitting down and having a conversation with Dan.
I love that image of God just opening up a window.
Just dumping it into the wheelbarrow, man.
Dumping it. And I got so much. I'm running around with my wheelbarrow and it is just overflowing. And things I used to be concerned about melt away as I listen and I trust my wife, right?
Yeah.
As I listen to those promptings and I do those things that she's in tune, man.
Yeah. I think, I hope that when people listen to Dan tonight, I think they're going to feel like we did. I mean, we've known Dan for a couple hours and I feel like Dan's one of my closest friends after spending that time with him.
But talk about, how do you walk away from a 2-hour conversation where you know a man's weakness?
Yeah. That's it, right?
And the cool thing is his faith in God has changed that weakness into a strength.
Yeah, 100%.
He lets you in on like, let me tell you how I felt about this.
Yeah.
And it's 100% natural. Like, yep, I could imagine having that same thought.
Yeah. In fact, as he was sharing some of those things, I mean, I hope our guests do the same thing, but I was sort of taking inventory of some of those things that I struggle with, that that I'm trying to adjust and find strength, and I thought Dan was just powerful. That journey was riveting in as far as I'm concerned.
Just say yes, man. Just
Just
say
say
yes.
yes. Yes to be blessed, right?
Yes, to be blessed. So Dan Collins, thank you so much for Alan. Hold on. Alan Michael Boston.
Yeah, there you go.
Alan Michael Boston, thank you for the lead and the connection to Dan Collins. Dan Collins, thank you for the way that you're showing up. And, you know, from a kid who struggled in school and maybe thought school wasn't his thing and thought maybe he wasn't enough, to where he is now doing the things that he's doing. There's work, and then there's transformative work. And Dan Collins and his wife, his organization, they're doing some amazing things to transform lives. And they happen to do a good job painting buildings.
Yeah, you know.
Dan Collins, you keep painting, brother. Thank you for the time. Tyler Gould, I'm a better man for hanging out with you. Hopefully our listeners feel the same way. It's about taking notes and looking for leverage in our own lives to take the lessons that Dan gives us and do something with them. So to all of our listeners, thanks for tuning in each and every week. This week is a treat. Enjoy The Richest Men in Town with Dan Collins.
Good. My son is just got his visa emails, and so he's thinking he might be a little bit closer to Brazil. So paperwork's being filled out and sent into the offices, and we'll see what happens.
I like the might be. It sounds like he's learning one of life's most valuable lessons, right? Managing expectations.
Huge. Yeah, that's a huge lesson. And he is in the thick of it. And he's actually doing really good at it. So I'm proud of him for that. So things are good, man.
I don't know if you've read The One Thing with Gary Keeler.
I have read it. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any
there's some things that I like, and there's some things that, I mean, it was good. I think the overall point of like being focused is a good thing, right?
It's hyper. This is hyper focused.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. But I do like that whole, he's big into like compartmentalizing and time blocking, and, so I think all those principles are good. Yeah.
If you chase two rabbits, you won't catch either of them.
That's a good point. That's a good point.
Russian proverb.
Is
right?
that a Russian proverb? Okay. The Russians do have some things that are.
Hey, he brings up that scene in City Slickers. Actually, let's be real. He says, considered one of the funniest movies of all time.
See that? There we go.
What?
Yeah, you drop that in there. Who's considering that as one of the funniest?
On page 6, I'm almost done. Like I almost closed it right there.
Yeah, I agree. Look, there's some good things in there, but that's not one of them. All right.
That is not one of them. But then he goes into that Curly, the conversation that Curly has with Mitch. And he's like,
yeah,
do you know what the secret of life is? And he does the one finger thing.
Yeah. Right.
One thing, just one thing. You stick to that and everything else don't mean,
Yeah.
I don't know if it's that easy.
I don't think it's that easy, but like I said, I think there's
how can it be one thing if, as a person where I sit right now, I can crank out a list of like 10 roles that I play.
Yeah.
Right. I'm a husband, dad, brother, son, employee, member of the church, right? Like one thing.
A long list. No.
I don't know about that.
I don't know either, but I do think maybe there's something to be said for, I mean, if you are singular in who you are in all of those roles, maybe let's just, maybe that's something, I mean, that's not how the book is written, right? It's about the one thing in your role, but,
yeah, I'm a sucker for an airport bookstore.
Yeah. As am I. I mean, that's why they got them there and selling them triple the price. For suckers like you and I.
For suckers like me. The one thing I read that, I was like, I love the simplicity of that. It's got to be simple, beautiful.
Gary Keller, who is the founder of Keller Williams Realty, is the author of that book.
Okay.
Yeah, so there you go.
Keller. I think I said Keeler.
You did, but that's all right. It's Keller. Yeah. So
I know a good sound editor. He'll make that like it never happened.
boom, didn't even exist.
Like it never happened. We should actually have a podcast on the funniest movie of all time. That would be a good discussion. It is not City Slickers.
It is not. Now, I do want to bring up, since we're on the topic of movies, though, we did talk a few weeks ago. We were discussing, I believe it was with Gus, and we talked about.
Oh, by the way,
yeah,
I'm getting some amazing feedback from our listeners on Gus.
Good.
Our older folks appreciated the demographic.
Well, that's good. He did go with. He had some old references in there.
They felt like they related, especially as they see their older kids grow up.
Yeah,
that was letting us in on that perspective. That was great.
Some powerful moments in there for sure. We did talk about Field of Dreams with our friend Gus, and I think you and I assigned ourselves homework.
I think we held each other accountable, even with some text back and forth, right? Like, hey. So where did the tears start for you in that movie? You said like from the jump.
Yeah, right out of the get, man. You know, I think like there's that whole thing when he's in the corn and he's hearing the voices and he's trying to dial himself in. I like that idea. I don't know if it's intended in the movie, but him sort of that battle of what am I listening to and is it important to do? And I think he kind of learns that lesson throughout the movie, right? Of like, I'm hearing it, I got to act on it. And I love it, man. I love every part of that movie. I don't think there's a part I don't like.
Well, and I think that's that relation, right? The It's a Wonderful Life of our generation.
Yeah.
Because there's some whimsical in there.
For sure.
Right? There's some spiritual, there's some whimsical, there's some, so George Bailey had his angel, Clarence.
Yeah.
And you've got the voices.
Yeah, I mean, the Moonlight Graham thing gets me. I choke up on that one every time when he has to leave the field. Come on. That's that's something, man. And then anytime you got James Earl Jones doing his Darth Vader voice, but it's in a different character, I'm in.
James dies, right?
Is that your take on the corn?
I don't know, because they talk about him like he's going to narrate it. He's going to break it down. He's going to write about it, but he's saying goodbye.
He is saying goodbye. It's certainly not a quick trip. I will say that. So that's a good point. I've never really thought about that, I guess.
I have not done the second part of our homework. If you remember with Gus, it was watching Finding Forrest.
Oh, I have not done that either. Yeah, I have not done that.
I appreciated that. Yeah, I will tell you a movie that I cried twice on the airplane, brother.
Oh, wow. Was that on takeoff and landing, or was that at a movie?
Let's just say the way back was brutal. 3 hours on tarmac, waiting for some documentation. You know that whole thing.
Yeah, it's
missing connections left and right. Yeah. The Pursuit of Happiness.
It is a good one.
With Will Smith.
Yeah.
Man, when he gets that job,
yeah,
forget about it.
Yeah.
Oh, anyway, I don't want to tear up on this show.
Yeah.
Right. That one gets me. It's grind. There's no happiness in that movie. Right.
No.
He's straight up hustling, grinding, homeless.
Yeah.
Amazing story based on a true story.
Based on a true story. Yeah. That's intense. That movie is crazy, man. In fact, it's one of those movies I don't really want to watch multiple times because it is.
Can't.
It's a little too heavy, man.
Can't, man. It's heavy.
Yeah. It's like at every turn. I'm like, come on.
And here's the challenge, man. Like, without getting way too vulnerable, it hits close.
Yeah.
As a mom and a dad, right? We've talked about the grind, and we've talked about how there's times where you walk out and it's like, no, we're good. Everything's good.
Yeah.
Everything's not good.
Yeah. And I always have this thought too. And maybe this is just what I tell myself to keep myself motivated on some level, but I do kind of believe it. It's like when I pass people, the other day I was driving through a parking lot, leaving, getting gas, and there was a family sitting there with needing some help. And so I stopped and I rolled my window down. I talked to the guy for a few minutes and, whatever, handed him a little something. But I always have that thought, like, maybe we're all just teetering right on that edge, and that could be me. If one bad turn, one big hiccup, and maybe that's me.
Can we shift even from the temporal to the spiritual?
Yeah.
Because you and I both can probably go through right now people that they are going through what you might call a crisis of faith.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Kelly and I have had this conversation. It's a little bit of a wrestle about when to intervene in the train wreck. Like you see him on the tracks and where this is going. And where do I play a part in trying to stop this?
Yeah, that's a hard question to answer. I mean, I will tell you this from my own personal experience in seeing some of those things happen close to people I really think highly of. And at the time when that was happening, I stood back and kind of thought, well, they're going to work this thing out. And it didn't work out the way that I thought it should anyway. I don't know, maybe it did work out the way they wanted it to. But fast forward, about a week ago, I kind of had that feeling about someone that I know, and I fired off a message that maybe assumed some things, but I felt like, what's it going to hurt? I mean, at the end of the day, this person knows that I care about them, and maybe that's the most important thing, right? And they could tell me that, hey, not needed or unsolicited, no thanks, or whatever, but it was received well anyway, graciously, I guess I should say. So I guess now I'm to that point where I feel like if you see it coming, you might as well throw the warning flags out, try to slow the train down. Otherwise, where you at? I don't know. What's your take on that?
Well, a couple of situations that I'm thinking of is going to require a lot of me, I think.
A lot of you?
Like the help that I would offer.
Yeah.
We talk about sometimes those promptings come and they're not convenient, they're not comfortable. It's one of those.
Well, so, I think
and then the other one that comes to my mind, it might be too late.
Well, okay, I have two thoughts on that, if I can. And again, this falls under the unsolicited, so maybe you just tell me to pound sand. I don't know. But here's my two thoughts. If you're feeling it and you're uncomfortable with it, you got to say it. That's one. And two, it's never too late to say something, right? Because if nothing else, it conveys that you were on my mind and I needed to tell you that you were on my mind. And look, the wreck may have already happened, but you've been on my mind. And I think that it's important for people to know that and hear that.
That's fair. That's fair. But on the first one,
yeah,
right? It's Mr. and Mrs. Freeman getting on the same page.
Well, you'll work that
out.
We'll
leave that one there. But I also think too, what do I have as emotion? And these probably are justifications, right? Like you said, if you feel it, you do it. But you start wondering, when's the last time they heard from me?
Yeah.
Am I only reaching out because the scuttlebutt is this other thing?
Yeah.
And it's like, wow, you're coming to me, my house is on fire, and you're coming to me as a friend, want to take me out to lunch. That's cool.
Yeah.
I don't want that to be insincere, but the bottom line is they're on my mind,
Yeah. And I don't think that much of what you say or do comes off as insincere. So I wouldn't be too concerned about that.
Yeah. I think the insincere thing to do is to squash it.
I agree.
Right.
I mean, then do you want to walk up to the car accident after, and years later and say, boy, I really felt like I should have said something.
Yeah. And how dare I say it's too late, right?
Yeah.
Believe in Jesus Christ and believe that through his atonement and right, the grace that's made available to us to get through things, and
never
life is long, and the arc of history bends towards, I mean, I don't know.
I think conversation should always be had. We know that. Conversation should always be had, and it's better to have them earlier than later, but at any time.
Yeah. So I've been thinking about this video. I'll drop it in the show notes. I don't know if you've seen it, but actually, Keeler talks about it, that domino effect.
Yeah.
And did you know you take a 5 millimeter tall domino, and it can knock over something, and the next one can knock over, and within 57 dominoes, you'd be knocking over something the size of the distance between the Earth and the Moon.
Wow. Interesting.
Like one little thing, right?
Yeah,
one little thing here, 10 steps down the road gets really,
deal.
really big.
Yeah. And that can go both sides, right? Good or bad.
Yeah. And Keller's point is find the little thing.
Yeah.
Find the one thing to get that reaction going.
Yeah.
Right?
I love it.
It's good.
Like I said, there's some wisdom in there, man. Some wisdom in there.
Well, we got to love it a little bit, because otherwise we got to cut out everything we talked about it,
Yeah. It'll be a short intro. Yeah. So, hey, you know what? I'm excited about tonight, though, because
I'm excited too. I'm excited for this guy.
We've got our good friend Alan Michael Boston reached out to us and said, "Hey, you guys really need to meet and get to know my friend Dan Collins." And so, Mike, you and I had the opportunity to get on the phone with him and talk to him for a little bit, and I think we both walked away feeling like, when we know, we know. Yeah, let's get this thing rolling. So tonight we have our friend, and hopefully tonight we'll get to spend a lot more time with him and get to know him even better. But our friend Dan Collins, and we're grateful to Alan Michael for putting him in our path. So,
and Dan Collins might know a little something about this domino effect, man. Our little conversation that we had, he had some things happen that just opened up some other opportunities to serve other people. And I think Dan's living that rich life, right? He's making a difference to the community around him, and he's living the rich family life. And I think he just got back from Costa Rica.
He did, just went on a surf trip with his kids. So
not bad there.
He's doing something right. I'll tell you that much.
so when we talked to him, he was coming back from a scout camp, I think. So that was,
he's
when you're going to go to Costa Rica, you want to back it up right off of a scout camp. That's
I think
some R&R.
Coming off a scout camp, you deserve Costa Rica. You know what I mean? So yeah, let's why don't we open the doors and let Dan into the room and have a conversation.
Yeah, well, let's see what Mr. Collins has to say today. Dan Collins, are you with us?
That's me.
Hey, there he is.
Welcome to the richest man in town. Dan, how are you?
I'm good, thank you.
You look good. You look like you just came back from Costa Rica on a surf trip. Look at you. How was it?
I'm still enjoying the high.
Yeah, I bet. Man, I kind of lived vicariously just checking out some of your posts on social media thinking, golly, I need to go to Costa Rica,
It's a beautiful place.
So tell us, you went down there with some of your kids. What was the trip all about? How long were you down there?
So we were only there 5 days.
Okay.
And it was really a surf trip for the girls. Usually in years past, I've always brought my boys on surf trips. And so since Courtney, my youngest, was graduating, it was kind of a graduation gift, so to speak.
Nice.
And so it was supposed to be 4 dads and 4 daughters, but my brother couldn't go because he got COVID.
Oh, bummer. How's he doing?
Fine.
Okay, good.
Yep.
Good. Well, that's quite a trip. I'm going to have to make sure my daughter doesn't hear this because she's a senior, and then there'll be expectations, and how that goes. So
this is a setup. You need to definitely keep Abby Gould away from this one.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. But we're excited you're here. We were just talking about our mutual friend Alan Michael and how Alan Michael turned us on to you, and we're excited to have you with us here tonight and spend a little time getting to know you.
Well, great. It's an honor to be here and honor to be on your show.
Well, Dan, you're hanging out with some sketchy folks if Alan Michael Boston is dropping your name.
Yeah.
So what do you think when the phone rings and it's the guys from Richest Men in Town reaching out to you saying, "Hey, we want you on your show"?
Well, at first hearing the title, The Richest Man in Town, I thought, hey, if this has anything to do with money, you got the wrong guy. But once I looked into it and I started listening to your past guests and some of these previous podcasts, and I was pretty taken by it. Very impressed with your guests and their life experiences and their insight. I just feel honored to be amongst them.
Well, we're super stoked that you're here. I mean, it's funny because, I think that, and I think when we first talked to you, Dan, one of the things that you said was, I'm not sure if I'm the right guy for this show, but that's kind of Mike and I's giveaway right there. As soon as someone tells us that, we're like, yeah, they're probably the right guy for the show. But we do appreciate you agreeing to be on here and share some stuff with us.
Yeah, I think in Alan Michael Boston's case, game recognizes game.
Yeah, for sure.
Right. We absolutely love spending time with Alan Michael. And then when Alan Michael reaches out and says, "Hey, Dan Collins made an impact on my life. You need to lift up the hood and figure out what he's all about." It's like, let's go. Yeah, let's check it out. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, and then there's daddy-daughter dates, and then there's daddy-daughter surf trips.
Yeah. Right? Yeah, the whole hamburger at Islands isn't going to cut it anymore, I think. You know what I mean?
No.
We were talking before you jumped on. We had some homework assigned to us by our good friend Gus. He talked a little bit about in our episode. It was right after that Yankees game and the remake of the Field of Dreams baseball game. So we watched. Our homework was to watch Field of Dreams. Are you a fan of that?
I am, but it's been a long time since I've seen it.
You got homework now, Dan.
Guess what? You got some homework.
Are there some good teaching principles in there?
There are.
I think you can find them here and there. I was telling Mike. Mike said, "When do you start shedding tears in that movie?" I said, "Gosh, I don't know, like 10 minutes maybe." I walked through the corn. I don't even know, man. It's good stuff, though. It's good stuff.
Yeah, I think it's a season. I think it's a season of life thing too. Yeah. Right.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things we were talking about, Dan, before Mike picked up a book called The One Thing. And, one of the things that we were talking about is, the premise of the book is to find the one thing that you're good at, right? And make that your thing every day. You do that one thing and great things will come from that one thing. And, Mike, what was your take on that? Feeling like
it kind of he quotes that Pareto principle, right? Like 80% of your success is going to come out of 20% of the things you do.
Right.
Varying degrees of that ratio exist in different aspects of our life. And he gets into that domino effect where one little domino can actually fall and push over something bigger, which then pushes something bigger. And then he talks about the power of finding that one thing and doing it consistently to unlock some things in life. I actually found, like, I'll be brutally honest with you. I felt like the title applied to me because I'm feeling a little harried these days. He talked a little bit about this feeling, and I've actually felt this recently. Harried and hurried, a nagging sense that we attempt too much and accomplish too little haunts our days. And I feel when I read that in the airport bookstore, I went to the register, right?
Yeah.
Harried and hurried describes my days these days. And reactive. And, this comes up. Folks that live this rich man life, rich woman life, they live on principles. They drive. They're not reactionary. They're proactive. right? It's Covey, it's Jesus Christ, but every once in a while, I feel like my grasp on that is slipping, right? And part of it's, you come home from vacation, there's 600 emails waiting for you, right? Yeah. So it's like, I'm on vacation, I'm getting work calls, and my family's looking at me like, are you with us? Are you not with, and you just start thinking, I can't win. So there's some of that. So
what's the solution, Mike?
Well, I'm curious.
According to Gary Keeler, right? It's finding that one thing. and I'm 3 chapters in. So
I think sometimes, it like we read stuff like that, and I've read the book, and I liked parts of it. And I think that we find a title like that and we read the pages in that book, and we're always looking for, at least I'll speak for myself, right? When I read those, I'm looking for that answer. Okay. On page 325, it said, if I do A, B, C, and D, everything's going to work out exactly how it's supposed to be, and you won't have to stress, and life will just go swimmingly. But we know that's not the reality, right? I mean, the reality is you could do everything that is prescribed in every self-help book that we read, and life's still going to kick you in the pants.
Yeah.
And it's still going to be messy. So I don't know. I mean, I think that while I totally agree, and I totally relate to the sentiment of hurried and harried at times, I just don't know. I think that it's a lot more complex than that, right?
Well, hurried and harried, to me, I feel like hurried and harried strikes right at my desire to be present.
Yeah, sure.
When I'm in trying to juggle and be in 2 places, that's always a challenge. To me, also hurried and harried, I find the path of human, just being a guy, the path of least resistance appeals to me. So those things that I know I need to do, and those easy things that aren't important, I find myself going to the easy things that aren't important. And
which is interesting, right? Because I think on the flip side of that, there's probably a list of things that are easy and important. And somehow, and I'm with you, because somehow I take the easy and important, and I'll set them over here and do the easy and unimportant.
Yeah.
It's kind of insane. I don't really get, I got to fix that. But do you have a book on that?
But that's actually his point, right?
Yeah.
When you think about it, there's this, like, honestly, guys, there's this video. It's a physics professor. He's got a 5mm domino, and then progressively each domino gets bigger. 13 dominoes down the road, the thing it knocks over is 100 pounds. He literally places the first domino with a pair of tweezers, right? And just pushes it, and they all go crashing down. And so, Tyler, your point is exactly right. It's finding that easy essential. It's prayer. It's reading the scripture. It's all those things, right? That we know that tune us in. But then there's Facebook on your phone, and there's the chess.coms of the, of our existence that just suck us into time sucks that we get a little lost. And I'll be honest, I think sometimes the hurried and harried is self-caused.
Yeah, and sometimes there's solace in the hurried and harried, because and this is maybe the sickness as well, right? Because sometimes if we can get ourselves in the hurried and harried, the important things that we have to really, we'd be better off putting our energy into, we don't have to worry about those, because we're putting out fires over here.
Oh yeah. And
you know what I mean?
And Tyler's good at putting out fires, right? Oh man, Tyler came in and saved the day. Mike came in and saved the day. It's like, well, why did the day need saved?
Yeah.
Oh, because
Tyler lit the fire.
Mike procrastinated for 2 weeks. Right.
So I don't know, Dan, give me the solution. What are your thoughts on that?
And Dan, this is where we get into the whole point of, this is a selfish venture, right? I'm a hot mess. Tyler's a hot mess.
Yeah.
Let's call up some people that have it figured out
and fix it.
Maybe we can get some answers.
Well, I'm joining the party because I'm a hot mess as well.
Well, hold on. Let's back up, because if you could just tell me how many kids you got, I think that is evidence that there might be a hot mess there.
Well, 16.
16
kids. We also have one more. We've had a little girl, foster girl, for the last year and a half.
Awesome.
So what people always ask, well, how many are at home? Because obviously many are married and off on their own. And so we're down to 9.
Oh man, it's easy street right now.
Yeah, well, my wife says, things are feeling empty.
No. Oh my goodness.
Okay. Can I, in that spirit, and in the spirit of that, and I know there's an amazing story behind each of those 16 lives, right? And in the foster child that you have. Tyler and I were talking before you got on about reaching out, maybe even outside of your lane or outside of your comfort zone when you see somebody in trouble. And we all know people right now that are spiritually in trouble, maybe financially in trouble, maybe a marriage that's in trouble. And where do I, as a friend, where is it mind your own business? And where is it, hey, you're my business? Right? Because I'm wrestling with that right now. 2 situations on my heart right now. One would actually even involve maybe a foster kind of situation where Mike and Kelly are taking care of someone's kid. Right?
Yeah.
So where does that come in, Dan? I gave Mike my opinion. I want to hear your thoughts on that. When do you feel like it's appropriate to reach out and to?
Well, if your eyes are open to it, it's there every day, all day. And it's at home, it's at work, it's at play, it's whatever you're doing, it's there if you just open your eyes to it. And you can get to the point where you give and there's no more to give. So everyone has limits. But you were talking about this book, Mike, about having maybe too much on your plate and doing a lot, but maybe not being necessarily that productive. And I think I fall into that with every aspect of my life, be it my family life, work, church. I mean, it's to the point where every day feels like a race. And so I think doing the one thing every day, and for me, that's to drop to my knees. Drop to my knees in the morning before I go, and drop to my knees before I hit the sack. And I think that's really what sustains me to live this crazy life of mine.
Can you talk about a little bit more about that, Dan? Because I agree with you. I think that, and see, Mike, that's sort of the thing, what we were just talking about, right? It's like the simple important thing versus the simple unimportant thing, right? And I think what you're talking about, Dan, that idea of prayer first thing and prayer to end things is that simple important thing. But can you talk a little bit about what that does for you in a harried and hurried life?
It's one of those things where with so little time during the day, I think the thing that I feel the most bad about is that I don't commune with God as long and as thoughtful as I should. Oftentimes those prayers are simply, you're exhausted and you're just doing it out of habit, and you find yourself saying the same thing. And I have to just believe that, a loving Heavenly Father, He knows just how tired I am. And the mere fact that I'm kneeling to Him is good enough.
Yeah.
So I feel no matter what effort I give, it's accepted.
Yeah. I love that.
We highlight that, right?
Yeah.
Whatever effort you give in your prayer life is accepted.
Yeah.
And I think that we have to have this notion, not just in prayer life, but in a lot of important aspects, and even in our professional work, right? There's this, well, it's not perfect, so don't send it yet. Right?
Yeah, right.
It's like, you know what? Get it out there. Like, done is better than perfect.
Yeah.
A done date night at Costco over a hot dog is better than no date night. Right?
Yeah.
A done prayer said tired, maybe even sounding like yesterday's prayer, is still going to be like, hey, God, I need you in my life. I can't do this. I love what you said too, Dan, about just sustaining this craziness.
Yeah.
prayer
is that sustaining influence that's going to get me through this.
Well, and I also like the idea of, Dan, you mentioned just having your eyes open, right? And seeing what's going on. And I think, Mike, to your point, your question of, when do I say something, or when do I have a conversation with someone that I'm close to, that I think might be on the verge of something catastrophic, right? I go back to that. I just think that if you're feeling it, you probably should have that conversation. Do you know what I mean? Because to me, that goes to Dan's point of eyes open. If you're there and it's in you here, then I think it needs to be said. I mean, too many times I've had those feelings and pushed it down and pushed it aside and deleted it for however long, and then later on,
or like you said, you think the situation will get better. You think things are going to turn around, or hey, they'll pull out of it. We all go through stuff.
What could I possibly say that's going to change this, right?
Yeah. The funny thing is, we all go through stuff. The only reason I've been through stuff is because people have thrown a lifeline to me.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. 100%.
So here I am sitting there thinking, oh, they'll get through it. Like,
yeah,
they'll get through it if somebody helps them.
Yeah.
I mean, how many times have we said on this show, just we are a product of 5 people we hang out with, right? Yeah. We are the people that light other people's torches. And we know this because our torches have been lit by other people. Like, that's the game.
Yeah. Yeah. Right? 100%.
Yeah.
How many times, Tyler, am I going to hang out with you on this show where I've actually got to hang up mid-show and go do my homework? Right? I don't know if you remember, we were talking to Gus, and Gus was talking about loving kids. Boom, that's the list. Love them. That's it. And it was like, oh man, I got to send a message to my daughter. Like,
Well, you might owe her a surf trip to Costa Rica, man. After,
how cool would that be? She comes back in August, right? Abe graduates. Abby graduates.
Yeah.
We need to strike that from the record.
Yeah, that's right. We're only going if Dan comes and is our tour guide.
Tamarindo, where did you go?
We went down to a place called Boca Barranca.
Okay.
It's kind of right in the center, and then took the ferry over to the peninsula. I don't remember the name of the peninsula, but so we got around. We traveled around and surfed some different spots, and just saw the country. Went to a waterfall, and it was beautiful. The girls had a great time.
That's awesome.
We know a guy down there, don't we?
We were surfing one break. We took hired a ponga boat to take us to this remote place, and the guide, we jumped out of the boat and did our surfing, and everyone else got tired and went to the boat, and then I was still surfing, and then it was about time I started getting tired. But as I was paddling to the boat, I saw some sets coming. The waves were getting better, kind of glassed off again. And so I just jumped in the boat, grabbed a quick snack, and then darted back out. And then the boat driver, he tells everybody, he says, "Do you see the crocodiles in the water?"
What?
And everyone's like freaking out, like, "You're kidding me. You knew that there were crocodiles in the water?" He says, "Yeah, they're in there, but they won't hurt you." And he said, and my daughter says, "Shouldn't you tell my dad and warn him?" He says, "No, he's fine."
Truly, ignorance is bliss, right?
That's right. That is crazy. That's crazy.
It's because you're saying those prayers, man.
That's it.
That's it, man.
Help me from the crocodiles I can't see.
Well, Dan, on the show, we like to start from the beginning, and I am dying to get into 16 kids, 9 at home. But before we do that, can you talk a little bit about your childhood growing up, influences in your life, and a little bit about that?
Sure. It's an interesting childhood. So I was born in Washington State. That's where my parents are from. And then when I was young, maybe 3 years old, they moved down to San Diego. We lived in Chula Vista for a few years in some apartments. And then my family settled in Spring Valley. So I have 2 brothers, 2 sisters, and we lived in a real small house, 2-bedroom, 1-bath house in Spring Valley. It did have a converted garage for the master bedroom, but it was a home filled with love and fun, and we had a pool in the backyard, so that made it all worthwhile. Growing up, when I was young, when first learning to talk, I had a stuttering problem, and that stayed with me through the first, I don't know, maybe till about the time I was going to school. And back in the day, they didn't really have special ed classes, but they had what was called speech. So every day I'd be released from my class to go to speech class. And everyone knew anyone that went to speech meant that there's something special about them. I don't think they even had, special education back in the day. But so I grew up with a little bit of a feeling that I was, not very smart. I was the one, having to go to speech. And so I felt like I had a learning disability, even though I may not have. But that kind of affected me throughout my life, in that I always felt that, learning wasn't my thing. School wasn't my thing. So, but anyways, I have an interesting religious family upbringing as well. My dad, in order to marry my mom, she was staunch Catholic. And in order for them to get married in the Catholic Church, he had to sign papers to raise his kids Catholic. And so after their marriage, he started the missionary discussions with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. His parents were members of the church, but were very inactive. And so he knew that they were members or Mormon, but that's about all he knew. So he's a convert. And shortly after his conversion, they decided to relocate to San Diego. So once here, they were both determined to raise their children in their respective religions. So that meant a lot of church for us kids.
Wow.
Whoa, both?
Yeah, both.
Both. Okay.
So that was back in the day when church was kind of split apart.
Yeah.
You had priesthood in the morning, you had Sunday school in the late morning, and then you had sacrament meeting in the late afternoon or evening. So since we were young, we got to skip priesthood, obviously, but we went to Sunday school in the late morning, and then we'd come home and go to Catholic Mass with Mom, and then come home from that, and then later in the day, we'd go to sacrament meeting with my dad.
Wow.
And then in the middle of the week, it would be mixed up with primary and Tuesday afternoons. And then in the Catholic Church, they have a religious course for children called Catechism. So we'd go to that on Saturday mornings. So needless to say, we were pretty churched out.
I guess. For those people that would complain about the 3-hour block, they got nothing.
That's right. So we did that until I was about 12. And over the years, my mom had softened, in time. She started going to church with my dad and us, but she made sure that she always went to Mass, even though she attended ours. She also got the feeling that we liked the Mormon church better than the Catholic church. We understood it more. But I love the Catholic church. I love the Catholic people. And I'm very proud of my Catholic heritage. My grandparents and all my uncles and aunts and cousins are wonderful people, and they're good Christian people. But by the time I was 12, my mom had finally made the decision. She was baptized a member of the LDS church. So that cut out half of our church activity. We were pretty glad about that. My dad, he was musically inclined. So back in the 60s, while we were young kids, he managed a rock and roll band.
What?
And we were like the famous kids on the block, because they were always having band practice at our house. And so the neighbor kids would always come to our house. It'd be like a little mini concert every time they practiced.
That's awesome.
So we just open up the windows and so that was kind of a fun thing as a kid, is always running around with the band. My dad never made a lot of money. Most of his life, he dealt with cars, used cars. We had a used car lot in Spring Valley. And looking back on it now, I understand more why he probably wasn't as successful as he could have been, is that he had too soft a heart. So he never was about making a lot of money on a deal. And everyone came to him with their car problems, their car issues. And I saw him help more people and help them with their car problems, or take a trade in and get them a car so they can get to work. So I grew up on the car lot, detailing cars, and I started buying my own cars and fixing them up and selling them, and that's how I kind of financed going on a mission when it was time. So anyways, we grew up in humble circumstances, but it was a good life and a good childhood.
Can I stop you there, Dan, really quick? You said you grew up and your house was a home of filled with love and fun.
Yeah.
Looking back, what did that love look like? Were they expressive people? Were you hugging? Were you I love you every night, or was it shown in other ways?
Yeah, there was a lot of verbal love, hugs and kisses. I wouldn't say too much of that, but it was affectionate, and I think the love was just in their. I think their love for God played a major role in their love for us.
How did you see their faith? I mean, I know you went to church all day on Sunday, but like outside of Sunday, right? Yeah. Outside of Sunday, what did faith look like on a daily basis?
We had our family home evenings, and my dad was always talking to us about the last days and making sure that our family's ready. And so he was able to really foster the closeness of the family, and that we're in it for each other. And so he was a good team builder.
I love that.
And did that work with your siblings? Were you guys pretty close?
Yeah, we were all close, and still to this day we're very close.
That's awesome.
Mom and dad are still alive, and we get together for family get-togethers, and it's great.
They're still close by. Everybody in the San Diego area.
All but one sister.
Awesome.
Why would you leave the San Diego area, Tyler?
I have no idea. I can't answer that question.
Once you got down there and got a foothold,
yeah,
it's hard to leave.
And you talked about that, the busy schedule with church, between the Catholic Church and the Mormon Church, and the examples of faith in your house. how did that impact your faith? I'm curious, like watching your parents worship both in the Catholic Church and in the LDS Church, and eventually that combined. But how did that impact your view of religion and church and your faith as a young man?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think for some kids that might just drive them away from church. For us, I think while I appreciated both, obviously we gravitated to the LDS Church just because we felt there was more truth there. It was more understanding. And so just I think the example that my parents set for the determination to stay strong in their beliefs, I think that affected all of us kids, that we had that same commitment to stay strong and to hold on.
I love that. And Mike, I mean, just think about that, right? I mean, this idea of finding truth and just living it, right? I mean, I think that's a powerful thing. And, I think Mike and I've had these conversations before about our own families and, kids, and what does that look like? And how does that look pushing out into the world? But I think there's something to be said about just living it, Mike.
Well, right? I think that's interesting because we were talking about that crisis of faith that we know folks are going through.
Yeah.
And my assumption, totally unfair, but might be founded, is somewhere they stop living something.
Yeah. Right.
Somewhere maybe you go a couple nights without those prayers, or you go a couple Sundays without maybe renewing your covenants and remembering those things that you promised to do. And as that distance gets between you and God, not that he's moved, right? He doesn't move. He remains there, steadfast. His promises are sure, but we can sure move. Yeah. And we can forget. And, Dan, standing where you are in your life right now, what do you attribute your ability to stay strong in the faith to? 'Cause, I mean, that's not easy.
Yeah. There's a scripture in 2 Corinthians, and it says, "For we walk by faith, not by sight." And ever since I read that scripture, it's like stayed imprinted in my mind that, when you're younger, you have this vision about what your life is going to be like. And as you know, that life takes all kinds of turns and twists and kind of goes sideways on us sometimes. And we have this need to control our lives and to call the shots. And we know that even that, as much as we plan our lives, it seems to take its own course. And so I have really learned how to live my life in faith. I kind of think about it in this way. When you're younger, you practice faith, and it's like a blind faith. To give an example, when my older brother, he served a mission prior to me, and he went to Philadelphia on his mission.
Get out of here! That's where my daughter's serving right now.
There right now.
Nice.
Yeah, Philly.
And I served in Pittsburgh.
Oh, nice! Wow, the Collins family
got the state covered,
man.
So when he was on a mission, he'd write these wonderful letters to the family about all these great experiences he was having, and how it was the best thing he's ever done in his life. And he'd always compare it to the stoke of missionary work is so much better than the stoke that you get from surfing. And as a 17-year-old kid, I'm thinking, okay, I know he's not lying, but for me, I could not fathom or understand how, wearing a white shirt and tie in the heat of the summer, freezing your tail off in the winter, walking around and talking to people about religion, how could that ever be anything better than, catching a good wave and the stoke from surfing? And so when it was time for me to go, I just took the leap of faith. It didn't seem like it was going to be as fun and as rewarding as staying home and doing fun stuff. But you take that leap of faith, you do it, and then you experience for yourself just how good it is. And then your blind faith becomes more of an enlightened faith. And I feel like the older I get, the more I start looking back upon my life, and I start recognizing and realizing all of the blessings that have come through holding on to my faith, the fruits, and really the miracles that come from holding on and not letting that faith slip.
Well, I think that the perspective that comes from looking back is so valuable, because I bet you there were days in Pittsburgh where they weren't. You would have loved to have been riding a wave instead.
Yeah.
Right. But after the fact, going through it and looking back on it, I think you're right. This afternoon, I had an opportunity to jump into a Zone conference. I don't know if you guys have had that opportunity, but that was kind of cool. I was instantly reminded that these missionaries are kids, right? And I was instantly sitting there. I was instantly put back in that same place when I was there, right? When I was doing what they were doing. And you're right, but you got to experience it for yourself. And so much of the gospel is that, right? Like I remember that quote from Joseph Smith after the first vision, when he comes in and he's leaning on the fireplace and he's like, now I know for myself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And until you're there, you can't, right?
Yeah.
Until you're there, it's borrowed faith.
Yeah. But I love that principle of blind faith to enlighten. You called it enlightened faith, where you see something, you've had that experience for yourself and it becomes a little more clear, a little more real.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a powerful principle. So you leave home, Dan, you go serve a mission in Pittsburgh, and can you talk a little bit about your experience and then coming back, what life looks like for you coming back from that experience?
Yeah. So I'll back up just a little bit
Mm-hmm.
and finish off my growing up years.
Yeah.
So I met my wife at a youth dance when I was 17.
Oh.
She was 14.
Nice.
And we'd see each other at dances, and I always tell people, well, she was almost 15, so
it sounds so much. It sounds so much better.
But it wasn't as though I was seeking after her. She's the one that asked me to dance. And so she's.
Well, that's brave for almost 15-year-old to.
That's right.
Approach a 17.
I always tell people that my wife was chasing me too. I get it, Dan. Don't worry about it.
So, anyways, as we were teenagers, my brothers and I got into surfing and skating, and that became like our whole life. My sisters, they got into the beach and a little bit of surfing. My dad, when we were teenagers, got into bodybuilding and started competing, and he was Mr. San Diego over 40.
What?
And so you know how guys, when
we got to track him down.
when they're growing up, kids, when they're growing up, they think they can take on their old man. And I always knew my place. I could never take my old man. And most kids are embarrassed to have, hang out with their old man. And that's like, I'd always like, hey, come along with us, Dad. I want to show you off. He's like a trophy dad.
That's awesome.
Can I nominate Tyler Gould for Mr. San Diego over 40? Is that still a thing?
I think it is.
That's awesome.
So then, Dad got into bodybuilding, and then Mom got into people. Mom was always bringing people home. Strangers, relatives that were, coming through town. There was always people staying at our house, sometimes for a night, sometimes for a week, and sometimes for a year.
Whoa.
Wow.
Where does that come from?
Both my mom and dad are just, like we were talking about earlier, they have eyes to see, and they'd see the need. And and it didn't matter what they looked like and what their background was. One day she brought an African boy, Yukachi, home from the grocery store. He was a bagger there, and I lived with the family for a few months. So that was kind of our house. It was definitely an open door policy. And I think in the, 15, 20 years that I lived there, I don't ever remember the door being locked. I don't think the lock worked. So we didn't have anything to steal anyways, so it didn't matter.
That's pretty incredible. I'm just, can you, so you had there's four of you, right? In the house, 4 siblings?
4
right?
siblings and myself, so 5 kids.
Okay. And then you're in a 2-bedroom with a garage conversion in Spring Valley, right?
Yep.
And the door's open, and people are coming and staying. And I mean, how did that affect you, seeing that happen as a young man? What was your takeaway watching Mom do what Mom did?
We all thought it was pretty cool. We were all in.
Yeah.
Obviously, our house, even though it was the smallest house of all my friends and all of my brothers and sisters' friends, everyone came and hung out at our house.
Because it's love and fun, right?
That's it, right?
What kind of kid wouldn't want love and fun?
That's right.
Yeah.
Like a moth to a flame.
Yep.
That's cool.
So when it came time for the mission, I was all in. A mission's about service, and that's kind of the life we grew up in. So as I indicated, I went to Pittsburgh and had some amazing experiences there. And second to San Diego, Pittsburgh is the best place on earth.
That's awesome.
It's an incredible town, and the people there are amazing. And so I obviously
Steeler fans, Dan. They're Steeler fans?
Well, that's the first thing I learned is they had just won the Super Bowl back in 1980, and that's when I got there. And everything was Steeler. And so if you can talk Steeler football, you can talk to anyone. Doesn't matter if you're selling religion with it, just talk Steeler football.
Start with the Steelers.
Yeah. Hey, it's like build on common beliefs. There you go. I love it, man.
So anyways, served the mission, then came home and started attending Grossmont College. We call it Harvard on the Hill.
It's funny. We interviewed someone from Wyoming, and they have their own Harvard on the Sage out there, right? So apparently there's a lot of satellite campuses.
Then a year after returning home, my wife and I, we got married.
Well, hold on. So when you went out and did your mission in Pittsburgh, did she write? Did you guys keep that connection?
Yeah, we wrote every week, and the mushiest thing we ever said was "Love Dan" or "Love Carrie." We kept it pretty mellow.
Yeah.
She dated quite a bit while I was gone. She didn't tell me that, but at some point during the mission, my sister told me, and that's kind of tough to take when you're a missionary.
Right, out of your control.
But I think she knew the whole time.
When did you know?
I didn't really know until after the mission. She knew when we first met. She told her friend, she said, I could marry a guy like that.
They always know sooner. They
Yeah,
always know sooner.
always.
That's years sooner. And that's 17-year-old Dan Collins.
Yes.
Yeah. Man, that's pretty impressive. I don't think I get that kind of endorsement at 17, you know?
Yeah.
No.
No.
No, I can tell you right now, there was no one endorsing Mike Freeman at 17 except his mom. And she was even blind a little bit.
He was skeptical.
He had her doubts.
I love it. So you're home for a year and you guys are married?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Go ahead, Mike.
So Tyler's got a daughter coming home from her mission. How long's Quinn got? Quinn's got.
He's 11. He's been out 11 months.
So he's about halfway. I've got a daughter that just turned, 6 months in the mission. And there's this pressure to have it all figured out when you come home. Right. So it sounds like you got half the equation. Fantastic. Now you're going to school. When do you start lining up with what you're going to do with the rest of your life as far as a profession?
Well, it's funny you say that because on the mission, you not only are evolving and changing and growing spiritually and physically, mentally, socially. You gain a lot of confidence, and so when you come home, you think you're going to conquer the world and you got life figured out. So I thought that I would go to college, get a degree, and do something with business, and get married and have some kids.
Check the boxes, right?
Just check the boxes. And I didn't really give it a lot of thought. I think a woman typically gives a lot more thought to family than a guy does. But so that was I didn't think much beyond that. But we got married, and Carrie was going to school also at Grossmont. She was in a special program for cardiovascular tech. So it was like a 4-year degree type school.
Okay.
And so she didn't want to start having kids while she was still going to school. So we timed it so that we'd had our first child just after she graduated. And that's kind of the way it started. And so we started having children. And I was going to school, working full time in the day at my dad's car business, going to school at night, and wasn't getting very far. And again, that low self-confidence about, maybe I have a learning disability kind of crept in. And so it was tough. I mean, even just taking the placement test at Grossmont College for the English, to get your required English class, I had to take like 3 dummy English classes just to take the required for your general ed. So I did a lot of just, extra work trying to get there. And so I ended up going to Grossmont College for 6 years, part-time, and until I finally had enough. And during that time, and I kind of also lost some confidence because my plan was to transfer to San Diego State and get a business degree there. But deep down, I never felt like I'd be able to hack it. And so while I was at Grossmont and had finished up my GE, I just started taking business courses and some real estate courses and just different things that interested me. And then after 6 years, I just said, okay, I'm done. I'm too busy with the family, too busy at work, and too busy at church to continue. And so I left school, and about that same time, I got a job working for a friend of mine who was a painting contractor. And so I learned the skill of estimating and started working there and was there for
Well, hold on. Can I stop you there? So is this the place where you say goodbye to your dad's car lot?
Yeah, and it was yeah. That's where I gave up the car business.
Yeah, that's like George Bailey in The Building and Loan, right? Like that thing's been there in your family. Maybe some pressure, or implied pressure to follow suit. What was that like?
Yeah, that's true. It was that wasn't easy because it meant that my dad would have to pick up more of the burden of running the business. But he certainly understood and knew that there were probably better opportunities for me to go outside the car business. So he was okay with it.
Can I ask you too? We talked about keeping faith, and as you're going through and you're plotting through it at college, how do you keep your faith in yourself?
Yeah, that was probably my most difficult time. Maintaining that faith, that confidence that you can do it. With the Lord's help, you can do anything. And that tests your faith. But again, I think just a commitment to God, going to church every week, whether you feel like it or not, you just keep doing that. And somehow in the end, it all works out. And in the end, that it did work out that way for me as throughout the years. But yeah, that's.
What do you say to the person who can't see the end right now?
I think you tell them to hold on. Hold on to that iron rod and don't let go. And that in the end, it will work out. And you may not see it next week or next year, but in your future, you will look back upon it and see that it all pays off in the end.
I love that message. And I'm thinking, Mike, you talk about coming home from a mission and checking boxes, right? And those, whether it's expectations that we put on ourselves or expectations that someone else puts in front of us. But, I think I love that story, Dan, I just think there's a path, right? And it doesn't have to be the path that everybody else has gone down. And it doesn't have to be the path that, we think is what's expected, right? You go to school for 6 years and you're doing it. And eventually you're just like, you know what? Too busy. I've had enough. I've got to move on.
Yeah.
And let's be real too. This doesn't happen in a vacuum. And people start saying, man, damn, what's going on? You're going to be in college for the rest of your life. You start feeling pressure. You start feeling family pressure as a provider. I mean, those things are all real,
right?
And so I asked that question: how do you keep your faith in yourself? Because sometimes those are connected, right? Like I'm a son of God, like you said. I can through Christ Jesus, I can do all things, right? I can do this. I got this. And when it's just not working, I could easily see that adversary saying,
you're not good enough.
Like you're not good enough.
Yeah. And I'd struggled with that. Absolutely. Yeah. Especially having children and more children and wondering how you're going to support those children. It tests your faith. And you're right. Confidence and faith. I mean, they're connected.
For sure. Dan, when you make that transition, leaving college, leaving the family business, going to the painting business, how many kids do you have at this point? And what does the family look like right there?
So by that time, I think we probably had 2 kids at that time.
Okay. So you're feeling it. You're feeling like you got to get things going.
Yeah. And working, for the family business, you're just taking a small paycheck home to help the business. So it's not like you're
Right.
So those were lean times.
Yeah.
Where you're wondering how you're going to make rent and feed your family. It was that critical at times.
Yeah.
Did you find yourself pulling from lessons Pittsburgh taught you?
Yeah, just,
I can't imagine everyone in Pittsburgh said yes to your message. Right?
That's right. And yeah, the mission is a little microcosm of life. It's overcoming challenges and objections and overcoming your doubts and fears. So yeah, definitely the mission helped. Laid the foundation of how to navigate through those times. But like everything else, you learn everything on the mission, and then when you come home, you really have to relearn it, because now you're practicing it in everyday life.
Right.
So it's easy to teach someone about paying tithing, and you can have a testimony about it when you're on the mission. But then when you actually have to practice it, you're relearning the whole principle and learning the principle of faith again. So the mission helps, it sets the foundation, but you're really relearning everything that you learned on the mission.
That's a great point. Yeah. It's the practical application of everything that you just taught for 2 years, right? You've got to bring it back and put it into practice. Yeah. But it probably doesn't hurt to have your wife by your side. Seems like you've got a pretty solid companion at this point.
Yeah.
Who's helping out, pushing you along as well.
Yeah. She's pretty stress-free. So was constantly saying, don't worry about it. Knowing that everything would be fine.
Gosh, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
That's such a
to all the single guys out there, find one of those.
Yeah.
Right? That
Seriously.
she believes in you even when you don't,
Yeah, definitely. She believed in me much more. In fact, shortly after starting out in the paint business, after about 3 months, because it really was an estimator, but it was to go out and get cells so that you could estimate those new cells. And after 3 months, I said, honey, I think I'm going to go back into the car business because I don't want a sales job like this. And she says, oh, no, you're not. You're going to stay with it and you're going to hang with it until you figure it out.
It sounds like hinge moments, right? The idea of looking back, you can probably look at a night or a moment or a conversation where you were about to give up and you're about to, and so many times we're right on the verge. There's a great quote. Elder Worthland. Remember Elder Worthland?
Yes, I do.
Oh man, Elder Worthland's great. He gives a talk several years ago called Never Give Up. And he quotes this: genius is only the power of making continuous efforts. The line between failure and success is so fine that we scarcely know when we pass it. So fine that we're often on the line and do not know it. How many a man has thrown up his hands at a time when a little more effort, a little more patience would have actually achieved success. A little more persistence, a little more effort, and what seemed a hopeless failure may turn into a glorious success. There is no defeat except within. No really insurmountable barrier save one's own inherent weakness of purpose.
What does that apply?
Right? You could probably
powerful.
look at that moment, those conversations you're having with your wife. Like, I'm out, man. I'm going to go back and I'm going to go do that thing because it's known. It's comfortable. Yeah, it was meager, but it worked for Dad. It can do this. We can do this. And she wouldn't let you.
Yeah, you gotta be grateful for someone who's in your corner that says, no. It's that whole I see something more than what you're giving yourself credit for. Go and push through this a little bit further.
So what is that quote
man.
from A Beautiful Mind, right? Like, I just got to believe something amazing is going to happen here.
Yeah.
Like, I'm hitched. My wagon is hitched to you, and you don't even know who you are right now, let me tell you who you are.
Yeah.
You're my husband, by golly.
And so when was that? When was that moment that you thought, I'm going back to the car business, and she tells you, you know what, maybe you should stick it out here and push through this? How long ago was that, Dan?
Oh, that was 30 years ago.
30 years ago. And I
just turned 60.
Dan, well, you just turned 60. You look.
Do you ever look around? Do you ever look around at the things that you have and the life that you're living and think, man, what if I would have done that? I mean, you might have been one heck of a car salesman. Who knows, right? Cream rises to the top wherever they are, but it is interesting to think about.
But here we are 30 years later, and Dan's in the painting business, right? I mean,
something must have worked.
Something must have worked. And having somebody who sees something in you, I think, is Mike, you said that, every young man should find a young woman who thinks that way. Right. But that's the reality, right? I mean, we want to surround ourselves with people that are going to see the best in us and help us see the best in us.
Well, and I think that's part of love, right?
Right.
The good kind of love.
Critics. You talk about that, like struggling, with the speech issues as a really young child. And then that thing's still kind of rattling around in your head as you're older, whether that's, real or not, that's in your head of, that's the story that you've built for yourself. And sometimes we got to have people around us that are willing to say, guess what? That's not it. Like you're this, not that. Yeah. And man, that's a powerful thing. That's life-changing. I love that.
Yeah. You're this, not that. I love that.
Yeah. So let's talk. To bring me up. I want to get into 16 kids, and we got to get there. Can you talk about kind of your life, married couple, as you kind of get to that point? Cause I think everyone's thinking Dan has 16 kids and they're not sure how this all shakes out. And that's a great story. And we gotta talk about that.
All right. You ready?
Yeah, let's go.
So we had number 1, 2, 3, and 4, like every couple of years. And after about 4 kids, I thought that's a good number. And we, before marriage and even during our marriage, we never really talked in depth about how many kids we're going to have. We just was like, we'll just start having kids and it'll feel right when it's time. So after number 4, I thought that was a pretty good time. We figured at least I figured, we multiplied and replenished, 2 times 2 is 4.
That's right.
So I was good with that. And so I remember a conversation having with my wife, and she said, I think just one more child should cap it off, just right. And so we decided to go ahead, take that little leap of faith and have number 5. And I'll never forget when she came home from one of her first doctor's appointments after being pregnant with number 5. And I was at home and she said, yeah, I went to the doctor today and they did a sonogram and we're having twins. And it was one of 2 times in my life that I literally just laid down on the floor and repeated to myself over and over, this can't be happening to me.
That's a great visual.
It is a great visual.
I was so shocked and so distressed. And right off the bat, I just started thinking about money.
Yeah.
And
right.
How am I going to support these kids? And, we don't even have enough rooms and beds. And she was pretty excited, that she was getting a bonus package here.
Right.
And I'm just freaking out and I'm really struggling with this. And I think my biggest struggle, more than the finance, was how am I going to look to my peers? People already kind of raise an eyebrow when you say 4, but when I say 6, people are going to crack the same joke, like, don't you have a TV in your bedroom? And so
that is a good joke.
That is a good one. It's a classic, man.
Always gets a laugh.
Yep.
And the funny thing is we didn't.
There you go.
But I was very concerned about how I'm going to be perceived by the world. And that bothered me. That probably bothered me more than the financial part of it and the space and everything else. And it meant also, graduating from minivan to full-size van. So there's all kinds of different issues, that you got to take into consideration. So we had the twins. They came 2 months premature. And one of them had some birth defects inside. That's one of the reasons why they came early. So it was an emergency C-section. And we got these 2 little 2-pound twins in a hospital. One is just barely surviving. And the doctor comes out and talks to us about doing this surgery for children that are born this way. And he says, in the past, we've always done it in stages, but it has so many complications that I think the best way to do it is just to do this surgery all at once. So, obviously we prayed and I asked him, I said, are you sure about this? And he says, I feel it's the right thing to do. And so he performed the surgery and he survived. That experience was pretty life-changing. I remember after they were born, and Carrie and the twins were in the hospital, and Sunday rolled around. And so it was, so I got the kids ready and took them to church. Obviously, everyone at church knew that we had the twins. They were in the hospital, and that it was a life and death situation for one of them. And so I was late getting to church because I was doing it all myself. I'm not accustomed to doing that. And I knew that it was a fast Sunday, and I knew that people in the ward had been fasting and praying in our behalf. And I remember walking in the back door into church, and all heads turned towards us. And the power of prayer and fasting encompassed me, the love encompassed me like I have never experienced before in my life. And I felt, live or die, with this child, it's going to be okay. I had complete confidence, and it was an amazing experience and a testimony builder for me about the love of God through the prayers and faith of other people. It was amazing. So the twins got better. We brought them home from the hospital. A year later, we got a call from the stake executive secretary, who wanted to have us come meet with the stake president. And I knew that there was going to be a change in the bishopric, and the old bishop, his time had come. So I knew that since it was a stake president that was meeting with us, it was probably going to be what I thought it was going to be. He was going to extend a call to us. So I thought, this can't be, because we have these twins. Every night we hook them up on monitors so that it beeps or alarms if their heart stops or they stop breathing. One of them has a G tube that we feed them through. So, 1 year later, their health is still very, very delicate. So I thought, I know what this is about. And the stake president, he doesn't know our situation. And I'm sure once he realizes it, he's going to think twice about this. So I had it all planned out what I was going to say. So we show up in his office. He asks us how things are going, and I go right into my dialogue. Well, we've got 6 kids, and we just had, we had these twins last year. Their health is very delicate, and so I'm just going through how much time and how much effort it takes. And he's listening with real intent and concern. All the while, he has a very faint smile. Yeah. And so I finished my dialogue, anticipating that he's going to rethink this. And he leans across the desk and looks at both of us. And he said, I understand what you're saying, but he says, I'm here to extend a call for you to be the bishop of the Santee First Ward. And I was so shocked. It's like, did he not hear me? And he went on to say, he says, I understand everything that you're telling me. And there will be many people in the ward who will help your wife, who will help your children. But he says, I'm not calling you to this position. He said, God revealed to me that you are to be bishop. And he shared with me a very personal experience. And he said, it doesn't make any sense why you should be called, but you are. And so I went home and I laid back down on the floor. And I said, this can't be happening to me.
Oh my
God. Dan, I don't know who had more courage, you for what you're about to probably say yes to, or that stake president for continuing to extend that call to you. You want to talk about confidence in receiving an answer, right? Because you had a viable out.
Yeah.
Anyone with an ounce of compassion hearing that would be like, I would crumble like a house of cards, right?
Yeah.
But man, the confidence that he had, and he had his answer, and it was you.
Yeah.
Dan, can I ask you what your wife's reaction was?
She was all in. Like on the way home, she's like, what are you stressing about?
I mean, honestly, I asked that question knowing what your answer was going to be, but I mean, I just think that's powerful, right?
Yeah, she doesn't get rattled very easily. And she's like, again, she has so much more confidence in me than I do myself. And I think the stake president sharing his experience with us gave me also the confidence that this is truly from God. So for whatever reason, all right, God, if this is what you want, I'll do it.
Here we go. Saddle up.
Yeah.
Well, and you could feel right now looking back. I mean, that was several years ago, but even in that moment, you could probably look back and see his hand preparing you.
Yeah.
There are prayers, and then there are the prayers you offered that night in the hospital. There's fast Sundays, and then there's the fast Sunday when the ward is united around your family and your family's needs.
Yeah.
And those things are drop by drop helping you gain the faith and testimony that you're going to need to be a bishop.
And turns that blind faith into enlightened faith.
Love that.
Yeah. And Dan, I'm sitting where I'm sitting thinking, what concerns did Mike Freeman have about being called to be bishop compared to Dan Collins?
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
I mean, when that experience happened for me, I had the same doubts and probably had the same reaction going home, laying on the ground saying, why is this happening? This can't be happening to me. But I mean, you had legitimate concerns.
And then after, literally from thereafter, the health of the twins improved and everything just turned out like amazingly well for their health and for our family, and everything that the stake president promised us occurred, and we were loved and supported by the ward in remarkable ways.
Everything the stake president promised occurred.
So again, it was one of those, you're not going to say no to it, but it still takes a leap of faith just to just do it.
Yeah. So here you are, 6 kids, 5 years into a bishopric. You probably do your time there and take us to that next level.
So I'm in the middle of being a bishop, and
you're painting still.
Yes,
painting business.
Painting business, working for this friend of mine, and then and making a decent living, and having some success in it, and it's a good profession, and I'm enjoying it. So things are working out that way as well. So about halfway into being bishop, my wife and I went to the temple. While she was in the temple, she had some pretty strong spiritual promptings and experiences. And so I know it wasn't at the temple, but maybe when we got home, or maybe a week or two later, she wanted to tell me about this experience and about these promptings. And so she knew I wasn't going to.
Didn't want to see you lay down on the floor again, right?
Yeah. So she said, I've had these experiences, these promptings, and we're supposed to have another child. And I'm like, okay, this can't be happening. And she said, but that's
you
not
went
all.
To the temple, right?
Yeah.
Like
I was there.
I didn't feel it. That's on you, honey.
That's right.
So then she said, but that's not all of it. She said, not only is there one, but 2 more spirits to come to our family. And then it's like, okay, I'm done. Like this, like I'm so spent already. Our life is already so chaotic with 6 kids, and we're gonna have 2 more. And so this became probably my greatest faith challenge in my life. Here I am, a bishop in the church, and my faith is being tried more than it ever has been. So again, I start thinking about finance and about space in the home and food and maybe getting the extended van.
One of those Mormon movers.
And again, probably the thing that bothered me the most, it's one thing to tell someone you got 6 kids, but 8 kids, I was so petrified about what the world would now think. And I thought about how I might be able to mask that or say that or try to avoid family conversation with customers that I deal with at work. And so the fear of the world like took a grasp on me. And so I really struggled with this, and I decided that I needed some help, because I tried to pray and fast about it, but I was not in the frame of mind and heart to even begin to ask God, because I already knew what I wanted, and I wanted my will. I didn't want God's will. So I really didn't even want to ask, because I didn't want to know God's will.
Yeah, without prying too much into the relationship you have with your wife, were any of these concerns shared with her? Did you just carry this inside, or did you let her in on your struggles?
Yeah, she knew. Yeah.
Okay.
And I think she suggested maybe I saw, but I called my dad and asked him to come over and give me a blessing. At the time, my dad was serving as a bishop. So we were serving as bishops at the same time.
That's cool.
So I couldn't go to my bishop, so I thought I'll call my dad bishop. So he came over and gave me a blessing, and I don't really even remember what he said, but I just remember thinking, I kind of came to the conclusion that I had to trust the spiritual promptings of my wife. I had to trust that those promptings were from God, and that God's will came through her, and that it wasn't going to come through me. And that really I was in no position ever to receive that prompting. So after the blessing, I kind of came to this realization: I have to trust God by trusting her. And then once I came to that realization, then I was okay with it. And then I just thought, okay, rather than to fight this, let's just join in, and let's just say it for what it is, and it just become a freak show. And so then I kind of embraced the whole thing, and just for the shock value of it.
I think it's funny though that the guy who is worried what the world is going to think probably becomes the guy who in everyone's world associates with family and kids now. Right? Everyone that knows Dan Collins is that's one of the things that they probably know about you.
Yeah.
I think that's interesting. And takes that thing that you're concerned about, and he actually turns it into something beautiful and amazing.
Yeah. So that was our 8 biological.
Okay.
You want me to keep going?
Keep going, Dan. We got 8 more to go, my friend.
So after number 7 and 8, so number 7, Chase, he's serving a mission in San Antonio, Texas. And my daughter, Courtney, just graduated, and she's headed up to BYU, Idaho in a few weeks.
Awesome.
They're everything in my life. I can't imagine not having those 2 children in my life. They've been just such a great blessing to me. And what's kind of cool about the whole thing is, my passion is surfing. And so as my kids got old enough to start surfing, it was always my excuse, leaving on a Saturday morning, hey, I'm going surfing, I'm bringing the kids. And like, what is my wife going to say? It's like, I'm doing something family.
Right.
When it was just me, myself, then sometimes I get the stink eye.
Right.
But when you're bringing the kids,
that's right.
The more kids I had, I always had partners to go surfing with. So it came around to really benefit me. And it's kind of a funny saying about women who are married to surfers. They're surf widows because they're always being stood up when the surf is good. So she's always been a good sport about being a good surf widow. And now I just bring my kids with me. So it's really come around to bless me.
So awesome.
But
that's like that's your dream, Tyler Gould.
That is it. I love it.
So then when our youngest, Courtney, was about 3 or 4, my wife approached me with another one of those husband-wife talks. And,
well, it sounds like these are wife-husband talks.
Yeah, not husband-wife talks. They're definitely wife-husband talks.
Yeah, because I'm never initiating them.
That's right.
Whenever we got to talk, it's usually her.
Yeah.
It's usually not about kids. It's usually about my behavior or something.
Right.
So it was one of those talks where we got to. She said, "Yeah, we got to talk," and I think that this was also a temple experience. And I'm thinking, there's no way, 8 is enough, right?
Said absolutely.
That's it.
And so she says, "You remember how, throughout my life, I've always talked about at some point in our future, I'd like to reach out and help other children and maybe do, foster care or something." And it's like, and I was listening and saying, "Yeah, I remember." She said, "Well, I really feel strongly that I'm supposed to do this. And not only that, I'm supposed to do it now." And I'm thinking to myself, okay, I got to stop her from going to the temple.
Right.
Way too much going on there.
Right.
And we're right in the middle of adding on more bedrooms to the house to accommodate the 8 kids. And then she throws this at me. So I said, "Can't this wait?" And she says, "No, it has to be now." So, by this time, I've kind of learned, that I got to trust my wife. I got to trust her intuition. I got to trust her spiritual promptings. So I think I was a little bit more accepting this go around. So she, over the next, few months or so, she took the classes, and she became a licensed foster care parent. And she no sooner got her license, and the phone rang that weekend, and they said, "Hey, we have this baby for you." And it was a 6-month-old African baby, Charity. And so she went and picked up the baby and brought it home. And I get home from work, and she's holding this African baby and says, "Look at our baby." I'm like, wow, that was quick. And she says, "Yeah, we're just supposed to have her for a few months, but she's really a nice little baby." And so we had Charity, and in 2 months turned into 2 years. And during those first 4 years, she was kind of going back and forth to her mom, and then she'd be taken back away and placed with us. And so at about, I don't know, 3 or 4 years old, the county came to us and said, "Okay, these children are now going to be adopted out, and we want to keep them together as siblings," because she had an older brother that was in another foster family. So if you want to adopt Charity, you have to adopt both of them. It's a package deal. So we took Imani, and we took him for a weekend just to try him out, see if he was a good fit. And there was something different about him. He was maybe 4 years old, didn't say anything. Later, we find out that he's on the autism spectrum. But at the time, he's just a little different and very quiet, but very, very well-mannered. And so we felt that we loved Charity so much that we wanted to adopt both of them. So he came to live with us, and we ended up adopting both of them. They have an older sister. She was quite a bit older. Her name is Papor, and she was also in the system. And we ended up taking Papor when she was 16, years later. And so she...
Which could not have been easy.
No.
I mean, you might be on that end of it now and think that was fun, or it turned out, it worked out. But bringing a 16-year-old into your existing family could not have been something that you went into lightly.
Yeah, we used to have her over on weekends so that she could spend time with her siblings. But for years, she would just come over on weekends. And during those years, Carrie continued to do foster care. And so we had numerous children coming in and out of our home for various lengths of time. And then we had
Sounds like your mom.
Exactly.
Yeah. very much like my mom.
Yeah.
And so we just kept buying more bunk beds. So then we got a sibling set of two sisters, Cece and Mariah, maybe 4 and 1. And they too became, awarded to the state, and because their parents couldn't qualify to get them back, and so they became adoptable, and we ended up adopting Cece and Mariah as well. They're both African American, and they're now ages 11 and 14.
Wow.
So that made at the time just Charity and E-Man, and then these two other girls, Cece and Mariah. So that was 4. And then
so can I stop really quick?
Yeah.
So when your wife was coming to you about, hey, I think we need to have more children, somewhere in there, one of your first instinctive reactions was to worry about finances. I'm just wondering the financial concern and strain that must have been present as you continue to expand, or is that just like the Lord's going to provide and it'll work out? Like, did you continue to have those concerns, or did faith just replace those concerns and we're going to figure it out?
Faith definitely takes a hold and takes away that fear. In the year 2000, I stopped working for my friend and opened up my own painting company. And so that opened up more doors and more opportunities. And so finance became less of a concern as I was self-employed. So once again, looking back in my life, I, being self-employed, all those years of going to Grossmont College and all those general ed courses and all the extra stuff that I was taking, business courses, all came back to benefit me. It really provided the education that I needed to be self-employed. And I really didn't need a finance degree to run a painting company. So looking back, it's amazing as you see the hand of God in your life, looking back on things and directing you. And what's weird about it is you're so oblivious to it. Just a door opens, you go through it, and you just do this, and meanwhile, it's God's hand in orchestrating the whole thing. And you never see it firsthand. But as you live long enough and you start looking back, it becomes so clear that God is leading our lives in the most profound ways.
I just can't. It's interesting because when you started talking about your time at Grossmont and 6 years, and you were saying, people are thinking, what in the world, Dan's going to have a career at college, right? And you're frustrated and you're feeling like it's not working out like it should be. And you pull the plug on that, and here you are however many years later, and all of that work that took place over 6 years is now information needed to help you move forward. I just love that.
Yeah, that's Steve Jobs connect the dots, right?
Right.
I mean, I think that idea. But I mean, I'm even going back to something Dan said early on in our conversation where we were talking about, eyes to see.
Yeah.
If you have eyes to see, you'll see it every day, all day. But you did say there are some limits. That there are limits to what you can do. I'm wondering, how did you push through whatever perceived limits you had? I mean, at one point you thought 4 was enough.
Yeah.
Right. And now you're at 8, and now you're bringing in foster children and adopting those. And I just think faith is removing financial concerns, opening doors for those things. Faith is now seemingly removing limits that you had perceived.
Yeah.
And now I'm wondering, are there limits, or is it all just lids we put on ourselves? Right. I'm walking around thinking, and I love life, because the paths that people take are incredible. Right. I had my first child and I went to the Ford dealership and bought a Windstar van, a minivan.
Junk.
Right. And we were going to fill it. We have our boy, we have a tubal pregnancy. We're not filling it. Right. And I find it so fascinating that the things that Dan Collins, the person, was concerned about, was scared about, melt away as your faith grows and as you listen to your promptings. And even as those challenges come up, you answer faithfully. Right. So when your children have the emergency, when your child has the emergency procedure, you're responding in faith. When you have the trial of faith with your wife and that prompting she received of having more kids, you respond by requesting a blessing. Have you ever sat where you are and looked and thought, what if that blessing didn't happen?
Yeah.
I mean, if that blessing doesn't happen, Dan, you're probably, faith crisis, we don't take those things lightly. And you said that was the greatest challenge of your faith, of your life.
Exactly. And you touch on an interesting spot. As I told you about the story about when Carrie first started doing foster care and we ended up with this African baby. She said she has to do it and she has to do it now. And having these African children has opened up other doors of service and opportunity, which I haven't even touched on yet.
Let's go there. Let's go there. Right. What has that done? So you were bishop, right?
Yeah,
your family's growing. You go through that crisis of faith. You respond with faith. Your family continues to grow. How does the Lord use this?
So 5 years ago, we get an opportunity to help a new refugee family from Sudan. And our three children, Papor, Charity, and Iman, are Sudanese. Both their mother and father are Sudanese. So being that they're Sudanese, we know a few of the people in the Sudanese community. So we caught wind of a new family coming from Sudan, refugees, and asked if we would help. So we went out to our ward and to our stake, and we got a bunch of clothing and food and household items and furniture. We got some cash and gift cards, and we went and met this family upon their arrival in their new apartment in El Cajon. So obviously we take our kids with us, to help with this service, and we meet this wonderful family, and had just a remarkable experience in really providing everything that they needed as they first arrived. This was in 2016, and in 2016 there was a flood of refugees coming to America, and in particularly to San Diego. And every week there were literally hundreds of people coming from throughout Africa and through the Middle East. And so the resettlement agencies in San Diego were pretty tapped out. So when they heard about the help that we gave to this family, the caseworker called us and asked if we had more resources where we could help other families and help with their caseload. And we said, yeah, we got lots of resources. And so we became volunteers with Catholic Charities. And every week they would call us and ask us if we would go help these two families, or go down to City Heights and help these 5 families. And most of them were that they were giving us to help were from the Congo, the DR Congo. And so we started helping these families. At the same time that we were first being introduced to these families, I was given an assignment to go ask this African brother to speak at a church function. And so I went and met with him. His name is Justin. And I asked him if he would come and share his story of his conversion. And he was more than happy to do it. And sitting down with him, I learned where he was from. He's from the DR Congo. And I said, well, wow, this is like great, because we just—
That's weird.
Yeah, right.
How coincidental. I said, can you come and help us with translation? And so he would come along with our family as we were meeting all these different people. And then at the same time, we're setting up networks within our church and our community to provide for these families who are just coming. And so this thing took off so fast and became so big so quick that we decided to go ahead and form a nonprofit. And Justin's from Africa. He's the executive director, and so we formed this nonprofit, and we called it New Neighbor Relief. And our slogan is "Love thy neighbor as thyself." And so that was the beginning of the humanitarian work that my wife and I started out 5 years ago. And it really only came as a result of the African children that we have, and opening doors for that to happen.
It came as a result of, we talk at the beginning of this about promptings, right? And if you feel it, to do it. And it's interesting, right? Your wife has these promptings and is like, we've got to do it now.
Yeah.
And I love the urgency in that, the lesson of the urgency that's found in that prompting, like, we got to do it now. And of course, right, it's littered with blessings. We've got these children that come into your life and enter your home and become part of the family, and those great blessings. But then here you are now with the New Neighbor Relief, and how many other people have been blessed, have been, helped, have been lifted, because one, your wife had a prompting and said, we got to do it. And two, you had an experience where you felt, I have to trust in my wife's prompting.
Yeah.
Man, it's such a cool.
Well, how about
cool
a
thing.
son? How about a son of a Catholic mom? Learns early on an appreciation for the Catholic faith, and down the road is in partnership with Catholic Charities welcoming in refugees.
That's right.
There's a conductor.
Yeah.
Right? There's a conductor, and we're just hopefully following the tune, right? And stepping where we need to step, and doing the things that we need to do. I mean, it's so amazing. So really quick, Dan, how can we connect listeners to the work of your nonprofit?
We have.
I mean, is there a website? Are there ways people can give and help?
Yeah. So I don't even know it offhand, like www.newneighborrelief.com, whatever. But you start.
We'll find it.
We'll find it. Yeah, for sure.
So that's kind of my part-time job, aside from running my business. But
and being dad to 16 kids.
The good thing is you've always got help.
That's true.
But I liken the paint business to the nonprofit world of helping refugees. there's nothing more satisfying than taking an old building, an old office building, and painting it up and just making it look so good. That before and after effect.
Nothing like paint. Nothing like paint.
Yeah, that's right. It goes through this transformation process. And when we meet these refugee families for the first time, and they're afraid, they've experienced some horrific experiences in their life, and they're put in this new country. They've got to learn a language. They got to work, and so as you're working with them and helping them, and then you see their progress over a year or 2 years or 3 years down the road, it's an amazing transformation. Far surpasses any building transformation. To transform lives is so much more satisfying than transforming buildings. Mm-hmm. And I just love that aspect of it, is transforming lives.
I love the whole journey, Dan. I love all of it. I mean, just, some of the things that we go through that we think are so inconsequential, right? That have no meaning whatsoever. They end up playing a big role in who we are and where our lives end up. And I love you started out by talking about having eyes to see. And I mean, gosh, after listening to you for the last couple of hours and talking about that journey, my eyes are open. And as you're talking, I'm just thinking about my own life, right? And you kind of start taking inventory of experiences that you've had and what you thought they meant then and what they mean now, X number of years later. And, you talk about seeing God's hand in your life. I love it. And I'm curious, given all of the things that you've experienced in this journey, and, with your growing family and the expansion of that bus that you drive now. I don't know what that looks like now, but what
two vans.
You got two vans.
We do. We have two 12 passengers.
Oh my goodness gracious. What gives you hope these days, Dan?
What really gives me hope is that through my life, I've seen firsthand just how much God prevails, how much God's hand is in our lives. And knowing that going forward gives me hope that no matter what happens from here on out, it's going to be okay. It gives me hope for myself, for my wife, for my family. As we continue to just say yes when God comes calling. That TV show, the Just Say Yes to the Dress.
Yeah, right.
I change that. It's yes to be blessed.
Oh man.
And as long as you keep saying yes when God comes calling, then it just gives you great hope that for no matter what happens in your future.
You know what gives me hope, Mike Freeman? Talking to guys like Dan Collins, man.
Seriously. And Tyler, every time we get together with folks, we've been big on honoring and allowing our guests to honor. And we usually kick that off with like, hey, how do you honor your parents? But Dan, like the life you're living.
Yeah.
I almost feel I'm going to give you the chance to answer it. But when I look at the little bit of time that we've spent here tonight, you're a living testament of honoring your mom and your dad, right? I mean, you talked about your dad being too soft-hearted for a car lot. And you talked about your mom just being into people, right? And just never even having a lock on the door. And look at the life you're living, and look at the home that you have, right? Yeah. But as you think about your parents, how do you, we're commanded to honor our parents, that our days might be long. How do you honor your parents?
Just like you said, it's by the way we live. really, I'm just a byproduct of their lives, of what they showed me. And so I'm just really following in their footsteps. And I think by so doing, that I'm honoring them.
At this stage in your life, is there anyone else that you would like to honor in our time together?
I'd have to say my wife.
You better.
Yeah. I mean, she is just an incredible woman with incredible faith, and she has such unconditional love. Here she took me as a boy. I'm still a boy. I'm still trying to figure out what I'm going to do when I grow up. And
hey, don't grow up. It's a trap.
But just her unconditional love for me, for our children, for everyone. I don't think she has an enemy on earth. Everyone loves her because she loves everyone unconditionally. And she is extremely selfless. On more than one occasion, when she has taken the kids to school and one of the kids have left their shoes at home, she'll come home barefoot because she gives her shoes away to the kids. On more than one occasion, when we've been out in the evenings doing service for refugee families, she's come home barefoot because she's given her shoes. She's the reason for every good thing in my life. She's just, I can't say enough good about her.
Aren't you glad you said yes to that dance all those years ago?
Yes, exactly.
Well, Dan, we can't get enough of this. This has truly been special. Every time Tyler and I get together and have a chance to talk to somebody about their life, it's a sacred, it's an honor.
For sure.
But we really do appreciate you letting us in. And I just love the evolution of your story. I love how faith just dissolved some of those filters that you had, right? Where the Dan Collins, the natural man, was scared of this or scared of that. And, and I do want to just ask this question. You started out that, your early experiences, maybe in early school, put some code in your head that maybe you weren't enough, right? Or maybe that you had some disabilities, or you had some shortcomings. Where you are now in life and the things that life have taught you, what would you say to somebody who has that same code in their head?
And it's funny, these things don't necessarily ever go away either. If I'm ever having to stand at the pulpit at church and give a prayer or conduct, it's like I'm petrified. Even prior to coming onto this podcast, I'm like nerves, like just a nervous wreck, for fear that you're going to say something wrong, or that you can't say the right thing or articulate it in the right way. And so it's constantly there. But we've been promised that in the scriptures that God will make our weak things strong. And he has for me, that he can take our weak links and make them strong and overcome whatever obstacle it is. So that it always comes back in the end to just having faith to do it. Faith to extend yourself, faith to try.
Well, if there was ever an example of that principle in action, I mean, it's illustrated over and over in our discussion tonight. I mean, sure, you ended up on the floor a couple times wondering what was going on, but shoot, Dan, I am just I love the emphasis that you put on faith, and I love the examples that you share of faith and action in your life. I appreciate you sharing those with us.
I think it's interesting that you're sitting there wondering if you're saying it the right way, and the way you're living is speaking volumes to everyone that knows you.
Yeah.
And so, Dan, you know the game. We always at the conclusion of our time together, we always ask this last question. The show's The Richest Men in Town, and it's not about finances, right? It's about living life the right way. It's about filling our life with faith and family and friends and influence and transforming lives. As we wrap up our time, Dan, what does it mean to you to be considered the richest man in town?
Yeah, I knew that question was coming. One of my favorite scriptures is in the Old Testament in Malachi. Malachi 3, I think, 5. I don't remember what it was, but I'm not a great scriptorian. But God makes a promise. He's talking about tithing, but I think that this applies to all things that we're obedient in. And he says, if I will not open you the windows of heaven and pour you out a blessing, there will not be room enough to receive it. And I love the imagery of that scripture. I'm a very simple-minded guy, but I literally think about God, being up in heaven. He's like pulling the window open. He said, here's some more, and just dumping them out the window. And I'm running down with a wheelbarrow trying to collect it all, and it's just literally overflowing because I can't contain it all. And I feel that way, that I'm blessed way beyond what I deserve, and that I'm blessed to the point where I can't contain the blessings that have been poured out upon me, in every regard. To have the best wife in the world, and all my beautiful children and grandchildren. I don't know if I mentioned that I'm a grandfather of 13, soon to be 14.
Oh my goodness.
That's about to get exponential.
Yeah, we're going to have episode 2 with Dan Collins.
And I didn't finish also that we adopted 3 more kids, which made 14, 15, 16, and that was finalized this last March.
Oh my gosh. Congratulations on that.
And so every one of these children have just been such a great blessing to me. Challenging sometimes, but great blessings. My business, I've been fortunate to not only to provide for my family, but to employ others, and some of my refugee friends, and give them jobs and give them hope. I've been blessed doing this great work, this humanitarian work. The blessings that come from giving, just the other day, with everything going on in Afghanistan, we've been helping families from Afghanistan coming, and just the other day, to go to an apartment of a family of 8, and nothing in the apartment, no furniture, no nothing, no food, and to be able to bring them food to eat, bring them shoes to wear, is a blessing that is indescribable. So it's one of those things where the more you give, the more you get, and I feel the Lord doing that, and that my life is just so full, it's hard for me to contain it. And it blesses me in every aspect of my life.
Well, Dan, I know some rich men, and you're at the top of that list, my friend. I'm grateful for the time that we've had to spend together, and to get to know you and your journey. And Mike, I'm grateful for Alan Michael. Yeah. Introducing us to Dan Collins, and
He knows how to call him.
yeah, that's right. But
I want to meet your wife.
Yeah, I know. But truly I'm grateful for you and for your willingness to be with us tonight, and for sharing what you've shared.
Well, it's been an honor to be here and to share that with you guys, and to have this experience. Some of it I don't think about a lot, but in preparation for this time, it made me reflect a lot, and again, it just makes you realize just how blessed you are. So thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely, we've loved it. It's been.
Hey Tyler, remember when this guy on the initial call felt like we had the wrong guy?
Yeah. He should be sitting in our seats talking.
Seriously. No, Dan, I do want to, Tyler mentioned it earlier in the show, and I just want to point out that what you're saying, it's moving things in us.
Absolutely.
It's moving things in us, and it has me thinking of limits. It has me thinking of ways I can give, of ways I can live. And it's making me think of the power of the atonement of Jesus Christ in the lives of people. And just what a truly transformative power that is. And so this has been edifying. And so we always say, cool, if it goes global and folks in Ireland listen to it, wonderful. But just for the sake of 3 people hanging out together, it's made some changes in me, and I appreciate that. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Mike.
Amen. Amen to that, Mike Freeman.
Let's let this guy have a Friday night, man. Yeah.
Hey, we appreciate you, Dan, and we're gonna do it again sometimes. We got to hear about those 13.
We gotta keep it going. Hey, Alan Michael Boson was 2 episodes. Maybe Dan Collins will be 2 episodes.
That's right.
We'll be in touch.
We appreciate you. Have a great night, and tell the family thank you for sacrificing their time with you so you could be with us tonight.
Well, thank you. And Tyler, we got to hook up and go surf sometime.
Amen. Yeah. Let's do that for sure, man.
You still skate?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. I got a whole garage full of stuff my wife thinks I'm too outgrown for.
All right. Let's hit the skate park or the surf, either or.
Let's do it. Let's do both. Why not?
All right.
All right, Dan. Have a good night.
All right. We'll see you.
All right.
To my big brother George, the richest man in town.